So-called Alligator Alcatraz looks to be shutting down soon. US District Judge Kathleen Williams ruled last week that the Immigration Detention Center in the Florida Everglades must close operations by late October. Late Wednesday, Williams denied a request to pause her order. The 2-month-old facility has drawn fierce criticism from the left for its allegedly unsanitary conditions, including reports of non-flushing toilets, unsafe food, and insect infestation. There have also been complaints about little access for detainees to the legal system. But that being said, a federal judge in Miami dismissed a related lawsuit earlier this month after finding that detainees did, in fact, receive access to legal counsel.
Department of Homeland Security balked at the decision, saying that the closure will disrupt the administration's immigration enforcement goals. Border Czar Tom Homan slammed the decision Thursday. Take a look.
I don't understand the judge's ruling. I think it's a radical decision. I think it's really about anti-immigration enforcement rather than the conditions of the facility. I was there. Look, it's a transition facility. It's not a long-term facility.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is going forward with plans for another immigration detention center dubbed Deportation Depot. It will be at a state prison. Although Deportation Depot doesn't have quite the same ring as Alligator Alcatraz, Niall.
No, they like their alliteration there, obviously.
Speedway Slammer.
I don't know. I mean,
Cornhusker Clink.
I mean, I don't want to seem too dour about these things, but I actually don't. The nicknaming thing, I think, is a sort of gloating about harsh conditions being imposed on people. If people are in the country illegally and they get caught and they're up for deportation and eligible for deportation, they can be deported, subject, of course, to due process. What I have always disliked about the Alligator Alcatraz thing is the what I consider sort of gratuitous cruelty of it, or Trump, of course, when he toured it, said something, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was how you should basically run to avoid an alligator or to get caught or whatever. And I was just like, these are people who have broken immigration law in pursuit of a better life. They have got caught. They're presumably going to be deported. That's why they're there in the detention facility. Okay, but this sort of, as I say, sort of gratuitous cruelty about it, I don't particularly care for.
I view it more as gloating about the fact that illegals are getting removed in the first place, as opposed to the supposedly harsh conditions, a lot of which has been unconfirmed. But is that? And I assume that's why the judge ordered the closure of the facility, or was it a separate reason?
We should perhaps have made that a bit clearer, because as I understand it, and people can, or producers or our audience can correct me if I'm wrong, the actual reason for the closure is to do with the contention that environmental reviews, which are mandatory, were skipped past in opening this facility, and that I'm sure this argument would particularly appeal to you, but that the delicate ecosystem of the Florida Everglades was being disrupted by having this facility there. There is, as I understand it, isn't there an airstrip close to it, or to the site of an airstrip?
The area had already been basically paved over, so it's kind of silly, but.
Well, the judge disagrees with you, Albert, so you can take your case to her.
I'm sure a lot of judges disagree with me, but that's okay. I just remember there was the Washington Post article that detailed some of the complaints from detainees in Alligator Alcatraz, and one of their complaints was that there were a lot of mosquitoes, and it's like, well, no duh, it's Florida. I mean, there's mosquitoes everywhere. I come back with swollen ankles every time I go to Florida.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
it's particularly susceptible to mosquito bites?
I am. I have what they call skeeter syndrome.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it gets swollen and it's disgusting.
Oh,
but not enough about me.
Fair enough.
One of the other complaints was that the food they were offered included cold ham sandwiches.
Oh, I remember you objected.
Yeah, I'm still mad about that. I'm going to lodge that complaint again. What other kind of ham sandwich is there?
Okay.
It's a cold cut. We love them in America.
Fair enough. I mean, look, there's some complaints like that. I take your point on. What is also worth noting, though, is that there were much more serious allegations than that about, basically raw sewage on the floor, and about toilets that didn't flush, and about the issue of legal access is contested. It seems to be the judge ruling against on that basis. But I mean, there has to be a baseline, just as there is in, or should be, in prisons or jails for people convicted of criminal offences. There has to be a baseline of adequate treatment. Nobody need be, put up in a hotel, to use the sort of language of conservatives in this. There does need to be a basic level of sanitation if you're detaining people somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And look, if there were complaints, it sounds like most of them were resolved, or at least DHS claims that they tried to resolve them. When they saw flooding, for example, outside of the temporary tent, they made sure that they secured it down. I would be interested to see if there was a difference in the conditions when the facility first opened versus what it looks like now. But I also think generally the American people, just based on the latest immigration polls, are probably not super fussed about the conditions in a detention camp for migrants, to be frank. I think a lot of them are going to say, you know what, if you don't want to end up there, then you can self-deport, get your $1,000 check, or don't come to the country illegally.
I think that it is self-evidently true that immigration was Trump's strongest issue last year. And still is. And it is, I think, clearly evident that a lot of people have a lot of concerns about it. And, it had always seemed, it's one of the issues where I am not as far to the left as some of the Democratic Party are, because I had always felt that there, and for that matter, some in the media are, because even before Trump came back to power, one would often see these reports about an individual who was in the country illegally and was going to be deported. And the argument at its base was often that that's inconvenient for that person, right? That they had built a life here and that therefore they should be allowed to stay. That's a hard case to make. To me, honestly, if someone is in the country illegally and gets caught for that, then there have to be kind of consequences for that. Now, there are things to be considered when relating to when people who are illegal in the country have young children, for example. What happens to them? I do think that the Dreamers are a completely different category, because as a general matter in any issue of law, we don't generally consider minors who have been dragged into an activity by their parents to be culpable for those activities. And so I think that the Dreamers are a completely different question. So if you're caught in the country illegally and you have to leave, you have due process rights, and those rights should be exercised, but there are consequences to it. So I take your point in general terms. I get back to the fact that I think it is, I do think it's gloating, honestly, the Alligator Alcatraz deportation depot stuff, or, the photographing of the people who were deported to El Salvador and Kristi Noem and her photo opportunity there. That stuff I don't like, but anyway, I take your point about the popular opinion on the issue.
Yeah, and moving on to actually one of my favorite topics that we're going to talk about. Trump is looking to make D.C. beautiful again, and it's not about the crime issue. This is actually different. How a new executive order mandates a certain look for all federal buildings. We'll be right back after this on Rising.